Imagine walking into your sister's house for dinner. The table is set. 5 bowls of food, still giving off steam. But nobody's there. Not in the kitchen. Not in the bedrooms. Not anywhere. The back door is locked from the inside. Their wallets are on the counter. Their coats are in the closet. It's as if they were erased mid-moment. This actually happened in 1969. A mother, father, and 3 children disappeared from their home while preparing an ordinary family meal. No bodies were ever found. No evidence of foul play. No explanation that makes sense. What you're about to hear is the true story of a family who simply stopped existing. If this already has you hooked, hit that subscribe button. Picture this. A warm evening in rural Japan, 1969. Steam rises from bowls of fresh rice. Miso soup sits perfectly still in ceramic bowls. Chopsticks rest beside each plate, waiting to be picked up. The table is set for 5 people, but nobody sits down to eat. Nobody ever will. This is the beginning of one of Japan's most haunting mysteries. A case so strange that even after decades, nobody can explain what happened that night. The Tanaka family lived in a quiet village outside Osaka. Hiroshi Tanaka was the father, a factory worker who never missed a day. His wife Yuki stayed home with their 3 children. 10-year-old Kenji was the oldest. His sister Aiko was 8. Little Haruto had just turned 5. They were an ordinary family living an ordinary life. Nothing about them stood out. They had no enemies, no debts, no reasons to disappear. On the evening of November 12th, everything seemed normal. Yuki had spent the afternoon preparing dinner. Neighbors saw her hanging laundry around 3 in the afternoon. She waved and smiled like always. Hiroshi came home from work at his usual time. The children played in the yard after school. Everything was perfectly routine. Everything was safe, or so it seemed. Around 7 in the evening, Yuki's sister arrived at the house for dinner. She had been invited earlier that week. When she knocked on the door, nobody answered. She tried again. Still nothing. The door was unlocked, which was normal for the time and place. She pushed it open and called out. Silence greeted her. Complete and total silence. She walked into the kitchen and froze. The scene before her made no sense. Dinner was fully prepared and placed on the table. 5 bowls of rice, 5 portions of grilled fish, vegetables carefully arranged on small plates. The soup was still warm. She touched one of the bowls with her hand. Heat radiated from it. This meal had been prepared minutes ago, maybe less than half an hour, but the family was gone. She searched every room. The bedrooms were neat. Clothes hung in closets. The children's toys were scattered in their usual places. Nothing was missing. Nothing was disturbed. No signs of a struggle. No broken windows. No forced entry. The back door was closed and locked from the inside. It was as if the family had simply vanished into thin air while dinner cooled on the table. Panic set in. She ran to the neighbor's house and called the police. Within an hour, officers arrived at the Tanaka home. They searched the property thoroughly. They looked in the small storage shed behind the house. They checked the nearby woods. They asked everyone in the village if they had seen anything unusual. Nobody had. The Tanakas had been there one moment, preparing for an ordinary family dinner. The next moment they were gone. All 5 of them, without a trace. The police investigation began immediately. This was not a normal missing persons case. 5 people do not vanish at once without reason, especially not from their own home, especially not while leaving behind a hot meal. Something terrible had happened in that house. But what? And how could an entire family disappear without a single witness seeing them leave? These questions would haunt investigators for years to come, and the answers would prove more disturbing than anyone could imagine. The morning after the disappearance, police officers returned to the Tanaka home with fresh eyes and better equipment. They photographed everything. They dusted for fingerprints. They searched for any clue that might explain where the family had gone. What they found only deepened the mystery. The evidence pointed to something impossible. The stove in the kitchen had been turned off properly. Someone had taken the time to do that before leaving. The pot of soup had been moved from the burner to the counter. These were deliberate actions, not the behavior of people fleeing in panic. Not the work of someone being forced to leave against their will. The family had prepared dinner with care. Then they had simply walked away from it. Personal belongings remained untouched throughout the house. Hiroshi's wallet sat on the bedroom dresser with cash still inside. Yuki's purse hung on a hook by the door. The children's school bags were packed and ready for the next day. Winter coats hung in the closet, even though November nights were cold. Nobody leaves home without money or warm clothing, especially not with 3 young children. Investigators interviewed everyone in the village. The postman had delivered mail to the Tanaka home that afternoon. He remembered seeing Kenji playing in the front yard around 4 o'clock. A neighbor had seen Hiroshi arrive home from work at his normal time, around 5:30. Another neighbor heard the children laughing and playing around 6. All of these sightings happened in the hour before dinner. Then nothing. No one saw the family leave. No one heard cars. No one noticed anything strange. Police searched the surrounding forest and fields. They used tracking dogs. The dogs picked up scents leading from the house, but lost them within 100 meters. It was as if the trail simply ended, as if the family had vanished into the air itself. Search parties looked for any sign of the Tanakas. Days turned into weeks. Nothing was found. Detectives looked into Hiroshi's background. They checked his work records and spoke with his boss and co-workers. Everyone described him the same way. Quiet, reliable, honest. He had no gambling debts, no secret lifestyle, no connections to organized crime. His factory job was stable. His family life appeared happy. There was no reason for him to run away. And even if he had wanted to, why would his wife and children go with him? Why would they leave behind everything they owned? Yuki's family was interviewed extensively. They insisted she was a devoted mother who loved her children deeply. She had no history of mental illness, no signs of depression, no indication she would harm herself or her family. Her sister, who discovered the empty house, was devastated. She told police that Yuki had been excited about dinner that night. She had been looking forward to spending time together. Does that sound like someone planning to disappear? The children's school teachers provided statements. All 3 kids were normal, healthy, and happy. They attended school regularly. They played with friends. They showed no signs of abuse or neglect. Kenji had mentioned looking forward to a school trip the following week. Aiko had been practicing for a school play. These were children with futures they were excited about. They had no reason to vanish. By the end of the first month, police had no leads, no suspects, no theories that made sense. The case file grew thick with statements and reports, but none of it explained the central mystery. How does a family of 5 disappear from their locked home without a single person seeing them go? The answer seemed to be that they didn't, at least not in any normal way. As weeks turned into months, investigators became desperate for answers. They began considering theories that seemed unlikely, even impossible. But when the normal explanations fail, you have to look at the abnormal ones. Each theory was examined carefully. Each one fell apart under scrutiny. The first major theory was murder. Perhaps someone had killed the family and hidden the bodies. But this idea had serious problems. There was no blood anywhere in the house, no signs of violence, no evidence of a struggle. The forensic team found nothing to suggest harm had come to the Tanakas inside their home. And if someone had killed them elsewhere, how did the killer get all 5 people to leave quietly? Why was dinner still warm when discovered? The timeline made murder almost impossible. Some suggested the family had been kidnapped. Maybe someone had threatened them and forced them to leave. But kidnappings require a motive. Ransom was the obvious reason. Yet no ransom note ever appeared. No demands were made. No one contacted the family or police with information. Hiroshi was not wealthy. He had no access to large amounts of money. There was no reason to kidnap an ordinary factory worker and his family. Police investigated whether Hiroshi had connections to the Yakuza. Organized crime groups were powerful in Japan. They had ways of making people disappear. But every inquiry came up empty. Hiroshi had no debts to criminals, no gambling problems, no drug involvement. His life was clean, too clean to attract the attention of dangerous people. This theory was quietly abandoned. Another possibility was that the family had staged their own disappearance. Maybe they wanted to start a new life somewhere else. But this made no sense either. They left behind all their money and possessions. They abandoned their home. Starting over requires resources. The Tanakas had taken nothing with them. How could they survive without money or clothes or identification? And why would 3 young children agree to leave everything behind? Children do not understand or cooperate with such plans. Some people in the village began whispering about suicide. Perhaps the family had walked into the forest together to die. This dark theory was investigated thoroughly. Search teams combed through miles of wilderness. They looked in rivers and ravines. They searched caves and abandoned buildings. No bodies were ever found, and the evidence at the house contradicted suicide. People planning to die do not prepare elaborate meals. They do not set the table carefully. They do not turn off the stove. Religious extremism became another focus. Investigators learned about several small religious groups operating in rural Japan during that time. Some were harmless. Others were secretive and strange. Could the Tanakas have been recruited by one of these groups? Had they abandoned their life to join some isolated community? Police reached out to known groups. None had any record of the family. None had recruited anyone from that village. This path led nowhere. Detectives even considered whether Yuki's sister was somehow involved. She was the person who discovered the scene. She was the last known person to have contact with the family. But her alibi was solid. Multiple people saw her at work that afternoon. She had stopped at a shop before going to the house. The shopkeeper remembered her. She could not have harmed the family. Her grief appeared genuine. She had lost her sister and nephews and niece. She wanted answers as badly as anyone. Every theory crashed against the same wall of impossible facts. No evidence, no bodies, no witnesses, no motive, no explanation. The Tanaka family had simply ceased to exist in the normal world. They had stepped out of reality itself. And Japan's police force, despite their best efforts, could not bring them back. The case was unlike anything investigators had ever encountered. It defied logic. It defied reason. And it was about to get even stranger. When logic fails, people turn to the illogical. When science provides no answers, they seek explanations beyond science. The Tanaka case became fertile ground for theories that existed outside rational thought. Just like with any unexplained disappearance anywhere in the world, speculation filled the void left by facts. Paranormal researchers became interested in the case. They arrived from Tokyo and other cities to investigate. They interviewed villagers. They explored the Tanaka home with equipment designed to detect unusual energy. They claimed to feel cold spots in certain rooms. They reported electromagnetic anomalies near the kitchen. Skeptics pointed out that old houses often have drafts and electrical issues. These researchers were chasing answers in places where answers do not exist. Some theories suggested the family had experienced a dimensional shift. The idea sounds like science fiction because it is, but certain people argued it was possible. They pointed to the lack of physical evidence. No struggle, no blood, no escape route. The family had not left through normal means. Perhaps they had not left through normal space at all. This theory requires believing in parallel realities. Most investigators found this absurd, but the complete absence of evidence made even absurd ideas seem worth considering. UFO enthusiasts also became involved. The late 60s saw increased reports of strange lights in the sky around the world. Some people claimed the Tanakas had been abducted by extraterrestrial beings. They argued that aliens might take entire families for study. That would explain the lack of evidence. The family had been removed from the house entirely, lifted away without a trace. Critics pointed out the lack of physical evidence for this claim. No burned ground, no radiation, no sightings of unusual craft, just speculation built on desperation. Time slip theory gained a small but dedicated following. This idea proposed that the family had somehow moved through time. They had been displaced to another era. Past or future, no one could say. Proponents pointed to reports from around the world of people experiencing temporal anomalies, missing time, strange displacements. These theories appear wherever unexplained disappearances occur. They offer comfort to those who cannot accept that some questions may never be answered. The house itself became avoided by locals. People began to fear it, not because of supernatural forces, but because tragedy leaves a mark. Children would not walk past it after dark. Some claimed to see lights in the windows at night. Others reported hearing voices, the sounds of a family going about their evening routine. These reports are common with abandoned houses. The human mind fills empty spaces with imagined sounds. Grief creates ghosts where none exist. A local priest was asked to visit the property. He agreed and spent time inside the home. Afterward, he told others he felt a profound sadness in that place. Not evil, not malevolent, just an overwhelming sense of loss. This was not a supernatural observation. It was a human one. The house was the scene of an unsolved tragedy. Anyone with empathy would feel the weight of that loss. Scientists and rational thinkers dismissed all supernatural theories. They insisted there had to be a logical explanation. Human trafficking, secret relocation, some unknown but entirely natural cause. The problem was that every natural explanation had already been investigated and dismissed. What remained were theories that required abandoning reason. But wanting something to be true does not make it true. The Tanaka case defied explanation, not because something supernatural occurred, but because sometimes terrible things happen and leave no trace. Reality does not owe us answers. By 1971, the Tanaka case had officially gone cold. Police kept the file open but assigned no active investigators. There were no new leads to follow, no evidence to re-examine. The family had been gone for 2 years. The likelihood of finding them alive had dropped to nearly zero. The case joined thousands of other unsolved mysteries in Japan's criminal archives. But unlike most cold cases, this one refused to be forgotten. The Tanaka house stood empty for years. Nobody wanted to buy it. Nobody wanted to live where such a strange event had occurred. The building slowly fell into disrepair. Windows broke. The roof developed leaks. Weeds grew wild in the yard where Kenji had once played. The house became a monument to unanswered questions, a physical reminder that some mysteries never get solved. Journalists occasionally wrote about the case. Every few years, a newspaper would publish an article asking if anyone had new information. These stories brought temporary attention. People would call with tips. Most were useless. Someone claimed to have seen the family in another city. Another person insisted they knew what had happened, but provided no evidence. Every lead was investigated. Every lead went nowhere. In the 80s, a true crime author wrote a book about unsolved Japanese mysteries. An entire chapter focused on the Tanakas. The book became a bestseller. It introduced the case to a new generation. Young people who had not been alive in 1969 learned about the family who vanished before dinner. The story captured imaginations. It sparked debates, but it provided no answers. Television programs featured the case multiple times. Documentaries included interviews with the investigators who had worked the original investigation. These retired detectives still seemed haunted by their failure to solve the mystery. One former officer admitted he thought about the Tanakas every November. He wondered where they were, if they had suffered, if they were even still alive somewhere. His frustration was clear. A career in law enforcement had not prepared him for a case with no solution. Amateur detectives became obsessed with finding answers. Internet forums dedicated to unsolved mysteries featured long threads about the Tanakas. People shared theories. They analyzed old photographs of the family. They studied maps of the area. Some traveled to the village to investigate personally. They walked the same roads. They stood in the same forest. They hoped to notice something the police had missed. Nobody ever did. Modern forensic techniques offered new hope in the late 90s. DNA analysis had advanced significantly. Police reopened the case briefly to re-examine evidence collected in 1969. Hair samples from the house were tested. Fingerprints were run through updated databases. The results confirmed what everyone already knew. The evidence belonged to the Tanaka family and no one else. No unknown persons had been in that house. The family had disappeared without outside interference. The village where the Tanakas lived slowly changed. Younger residents moved away to cities. Older residents passed away. Eventually, few people remained who remembered the family personally. The story became local legend rather than living memory. Parents told children about the house where people vanished, but it became like a ghost story, something that happened long ago to people nobody knew. Yuki's sister never stopped searching for answers. She spent decades writing to police departments and private investigators. She offered rewards for information. She appeared on television pleading for anyone with knowledge to come forward. She died in 2005 without ever learning what happened to her sister and the children. Her own children continued the search after her death. The case had become a multi-generational quest. In 2010, the old Tanaka house was finally demolished. The land was cleared and turned into a small park. Some people protested. They felt the house should be preserved as a historical site. Others were relieved to see it gone. The building had become a dark landmark, a place associated with loss and fear. Tearing it down felt like closing a chapter, even though the story itself remained unfinished. Today, the case file sits in a police archive. It can be requested by researchers and journalists. The documents paint a picture of thorough investigation that led nowhere. Hundreds of pages, thousands of hours of work, all of it resulting in nothing but questions. The file remains technically open. If new evidence appeared, it would be investigated. But after more than 50 years, new evidence seems impossible. More than 5 decades have passed since that November evening in 1969. The Tanaka family has been gone longer than they were ever alive. Kenji would be in his 60s now. Aiko in her late 50s. Little Haruto would be approaching 60. If they survived whatever happened that night, they have lived entire lives we know nothing about. They have aged in shadows, existed in silence, remained hidden from a world that never stopped looking. This case disturbs us because it violates fundamental rules we assume about reality. People do not simply vanish. Families do not evaporate from their homes. There are always clues, always evidence, always some thread that can be followed to the truth. The Tanaka case offers none of these comforts. It presents us with a locked room mystery where the room was not locked and the mystery has no answer. What makes it worse is the mundane setting. This did not happen in a remote wilderness, not in some dangerous part of the world. It happened in a normal house in a quiet village, to an ordinary family doing ordinary things, making dinner, setting the table, preparing for a normal evening. If it happened to them, it could happen to anyone. That realization keeps this case alive in public consciousness. We see ourselves in the Tanakas. We recognize our own lives in their final moments. The untouched meal haunts the imagination. Those bowls of rice going cold, that soup losing its warmth, chopsticks that never touched food. The image represents interruption at its most profound. Life stopped mid-action. Existence paused and never resumed. We want to know what the family thought in their last moments. Did they know something was wrong? Did they leave willingly or were they taken? Did they suffer or did they simply cease to be? Every theory has been explored and found wanting. Murder without evidence, kidnapping without motive, suicide without bodies, supernatural forces beyond proof. Each explanation requires us to believe something unlikely. But the truth itself is unlikely. The truth is that 5 people disappeared completely. That is what happened. How it happened remains beyond our understanding. Some believe the answer is simple and we just have not found it yet. Maybe the family did run away and created new identities. Maybe they are living quiet lives somewhere under different names. This explanation requires them to have abandoned everything. Their extended family, their history, their very selves. It requires 3 children to have gone along with this plan and never spoken about it. Even decades later, even as adults with their own lives, this seems impossible. But so does everything else. Others think the truth is darker, that the family met with foul play we simply cannot prove, that someone clever and careful removed all evidence of a crime, that 5 bodies are hidden, so well they will never be discovered. This explanation at least fits within normal reality. Crimes happen. People get away with them. But it does not explain the care taken with dinner, the turn-off stove, the lack of any struggle or sign of panic. Then there are those who believe something genuinely inexplicable occurred, that the Tanakas encountered something our science cannot measure or our logic cannot contain. They stepped through a door we cannot see. They entered a space we cannot reach. They exist now in some state we cannot imagine. This explanation asks us to abandon rationality. But when rationality has already abandoned us, maybe that is all we have left. The truth is that we will probably never know what happened to the Tanaka family. The evidence is gone. The witnesses are gone. Time has erased whatever answers might have existed. The case will remain open forever, not because investigators are still working on it, but because it can never be closed without resolution. The file will sit in that archive until paper crumbles to dust, a testament to human limitation, a reminder that some questions have no answers. What happened in that house on November 12th, 1969? Where did Hiroshi take his final step? What was the last thing Yuki saw? Did Kenji understand what was happening? Did Aiko cry out? Did Haruto reach for his mother? We will never know. We can only stand in the space where their house once existed and feel the weight of their absence. We can only imagine steam rising from bowls that would never be touched. We can only wonder about the family who vanished before dinner was served. If you found this story as haunting as I did, consider subscribing to hear more mysteries that challenge everything we think we know about reality. Share your own theories in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that refuse to end.